morning, day 55. It is a chilly morning. I'm going to try to keep today short because I know yesterday was a long one. And mainly because there was so much of 1 Samuel to summarize for you. Or 2 Samuel, sorry. But today we're dipping into the first chapter of 1 Kings. And David, so the title of today, I had a hard time with this one. I was like, could it be this one? I tend to overthink things. But anyway, it's your inner circle, the importance of your inner circle. And having people around you that you trust, really trust with your life, with making smart decisions that can remind you, hold you accountable, when you can lose your way or when you can be swayed by people that maybe you like very much and that you think highly of, love even, but, they're not, those maybe people that when your back's up against the wall or when a really important decision needs to be made, that they're not who you would go to. And this is really important. Or maybe maybe you've never really thought about this, and there are people that are speaking into you and having a voice, an important voice in your life that maybe shouldn't. Yeah, that's the other, thing if you've never really thought about this, and whether it's family members or friends that you've had since high school or whatever, and you like them a lot, and you never really have thought about this, but they say you are the 5 people you spend the most time with. So who are you keeping company with? Who's your inner circle? Are they helping you be the best you, and stay true to what you really want, what God wants for you, helping you have integrity, maybe when you don't want to or are struggling. So anyway, the scene, let me set the stage here at the beginning of 1 Kings. And it is, David has ruled as king. He's on his deathbed, basically. And there's an interesting element where they say there is a young woman that's been brought to him because he's having trouble keeping warm. And there's no hanky-panky going on. It's literally a body there to keep him warm. And I guess one that's pleasant. And I'm like, why? So when you're reading the Bible, you've really got to think, what's there is there for a reason. It's intentional. You have to kind of look under the hood, what are they really saying there? Why is it important that even a nugget like that is in there? And for me, what I thought of was, I really tried to imagine myself living back in these times and what life must have been like. They didn't have the safety of, I live in America, the safety of a government, that allows us to sort of live freely, focus on one relationship, love our children without a lot of fear. They didn't have that. It was kill or be killed. We got to make as many humans as possible so that we have a kingdom and people to fight. The value of life and relationships was not what we have today. And it was practical for a purpose, survival. There was no main government. That's why they were battling all the time. They were constantly fighting for who was in control, and they needed people. So there were multiple wives. You could have more kids if you had more wives. And women were definitely, limited because of their role as caretakers and even having convenient things things to help us go about our daily lives when it's, that time of the month. They didn't have any of that. So sometimes you have to really slow yourself down and think about the practicalities of what, and the realities, not practicalities, but realities of their life. And it's not our values, because they also didn't have the same things to deal with that we have. Like, life was totally different, and so the expectations were totally different. So then as we go a little bit further into the first chapter, Nathan and Bathsheba come back on the scene. It's a full circle moment of David's inner circle, and the importance of the trust and the relationship that he had with these two people, and that they also had this shared experience of knowing the truth about when David got off track and got together with Bathsheba in the first place. So David's at the end of his life, and he's got lots of sons. One of them is gathering popularity and people following him, and he's kind of walking around going, I'm going to be king. And it also kind of mentions in this story that David wasn't the best father as far as like reprimanding and disciplining his sons. So they were kind of off, doing what they wanted to do, because basically they had been given by permission through omission to kind of, think that, oh, well, I'm David's son, I'm important, I'll be king. And meanwhile, it really is up to David or he has an opportunity, if he takes it before he dies, for him to appoint his successor. And if he doesn't, then, one of these other people is going to be king. And he loved them very much, I'm sure he did. But they weren't part of this inner circle, this trusted inner circle. So Nathan kind of knows David better than he knows himself. And we kind of got the gist of that from him being able to come to David when he had done this bad thing against Uriah, the Hittite, by, sleeping with his wife, Bathsheba, and then producing a son even from that relationship. But it was Nathan that was able to speak to David's heart and convict him and get him back on track. So Nathan is part of David's trusted inner circle, one of his inner advisors. He goes to Bathsheba before, when all of this is like, hey, Solomon needs to become king. And I know he's going to listen to you, but just to make sure and to remind him of what he has said, I'm going to also come behind you and verify this. And hey, I look so cold. It's cold. It is cold out here. So he is there to remind them, David, of what he had said to Bathsheba about Solomon becoming king, and a promise he had made a long time ago. So because David trusts these two, and they also know David really well, and they all have an eye on the bigger picture and the better part of David, and all of this bigger stuff in mind, they come up with this plan to go, you need to appoint Solomon before you pass away as the new king. So that happens, and it works. David is reminded of his own oath. And if there was any chance he wasn't going to trust Bathsheba or try to wiggle his way out of it, because he could say, well, that was a long time ago. He doesn't quite have the same relationship with these wives, and maybe he doesn't have the energy, whatever. But he gets this confirmation also from Nathan, his trusted advisor and friend, longtime friend. So it's kind of interesting that at the early part of his kingship, that what could have totally derailed him with his affair with Bathsheba, and then his consequent, the steps he took after that to cover it up and have Uriah murdered, that really could have gotten him off track. And so it's interesting to see that full circle come back. And then David and these three, in a situation, again, reminding David of who he really is, what he has said, what needs to happen. And then David listens. And then, of course, we have King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes, and one of the wisest men to ever live, supposedly. So it's going to be an adventure. But all of that to say and remind you how important it is to have people in your life that trust you, will remind you, even when it doesn't feel comfortable, maybe even if it's not what you really want to do, that you really take an inventory of. I was on a coaching call the other day, and I love the way this author put it. We had our author come speak to us, so cool. Terry Cole, author of Boundary Boss. And she said, who's on your VIP list? And we were talking about the subject of boundaries, and really so that you can have integrity and stay true and you don't get off track. That is one of the roles that your VIPs or your inner circle help you live in integrity. So you're not being pulled in too many directions, suffering from like shiny object syndrome, like kind of forgetting, like, ooh, this person sounds good over there, or letting people speak into your lives that maybe are really speaking to you out of fear, because they don't want you changing too much, or they don't want you becoming too much because they might be left behind, or they're afraid of whatever you're doing is going to affect them, rather than really wanting you to be the best you. And are you that for other people? Are you in somebody's inner circle? Are you trusted? Are you trustworthy? Because that takes a lot of integrity and character to support people, to hold them accountable, to speak truth in love. It's not always like rainbows and butterflies and we're all just being yes people to each other. What Nathan had to do with David was not easy. He probably really liked David and really wanted to be his cheerleader. But he knew better, and he knew God's plan better, and he was willing to do and say the tough things to hold David accountable to who he really was, whose they both really were, and the bigger plan, and keep the bigger vision in mind of what needed to happen. And even Bathsheba was able to do that. And she must have kind of doubted herself, because here he is being kept warm by this lovely young lady, and maybe she thought in her humanness, I'm probably not really that important to David. I'm just one of a few wives. I was important to him once, but I'm not anymore. Again, relationships were just so different than expectations. But Nathan knew that what she said and what her words reminding David would matter. And he was going to back her up, back them both up, back God up. So you need a Nathan in your life. And are you a Nathan for somebody else? So, who's in your inner circle? And whose inner circle are you a part of? And if that's something you've never thought of and you don't know, hey, time to make your own VIP list and check around and see if somebody thinks highly of you enough to be on their VIP list. And if not, what can you do to be in somebody's corner in that way? To be that kind of person that is trustworthy and of such high integrity, that they come to you and that they want you on the VIP list. Some interesting things to think about. All right. Hopefully I did keep it a little bit shorter And yes, Scott, I'm going to go get warm now. All right, bye.